Now, fortunately, I figured out a way to trace a lot of this terrain by piercing the map with toothpicks all the way along the ridges of the terrain or the river, so that after lifting the map, I was just left with the toothpicks and I can basically do a connect the dot drawing. There's plenty more terrain to do, and some of it, as you can see, is going to be layered quite high, but a lot of these are just in sections that I can now cut out and use these as templates to quickly trace and cut foam and put it in place and build it up quick. Now, as you'll see, those first few layers of foam I put on top of the blue foam are making much more sense because I can carve out the shape of the riverbeds and water and pluck those layers out to start having terrain that goes down as well as up. It's time to bring it all back together again. Use those shapes that I cut out to trace layers and layers of foam to really elevate our scenery. This was a lot, but it looks so cool! The main thing is all of the edges are done that are gonna have the stonework that you can see on the edges of the terrain in the game. Now, my little secret for this project is I've had to think and work ahead. There is so much I have to populate this board with. So for the last month, there's been sculpting and lots of 3D printing to bring this all together. The first thing I needed to work on is the rock faces around all of the edges of this board. Flash back to how I made those. Now, to make my rock molds, I sculpt in the only way I know how, in virtual reality. Using Adobe Medium, I bring in some pre-measured rectangular prisms, specifically measured to be 2 centimeters tall and almost the full width of a 3D print bed. There's also a variation that's 4 centimeters tall, which I'll do second, but basically using this geometry to create the patterns and textures that I want to cover my terrain edges with. And when I'm happy with how both of my rock blocks look, I duplicate them multiple times and create sort of a square bowl for them all to sort of be held in. The idea being that I can export this and 3D print this all as one solid block ready to pour silicon into. This has filled the whole print bed and the detail is insane. I printed this on a high level of detail because there are different options, so it took a bit longer. For filament printing, that's insane detail. Like, you can barely see the layer lines. Now that I have my mold maker, let's make a mold. And because I made a mold maker, when that's done, I can just make another silicon mold and pour my plaster into it, and I'll have perfect rocks to... All right, still gotta figure out the formula. Now, I think the reason that last one went wrong was because we used paint in our mix, and I'm wondering if mixing in ink will mean that we won't be introducing more moisture to the plaster mix. So with a bit of experimenting, I've tried to come up with a formula that I can repeat to get this sort of mid-grey color, which is all around the terrain in Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. We have mass-produced all of our rock faces. Now it's time to put them on the board. So with the help of Sikaflex and our pre-hot glued rock faces, teamwork makes the dream work as we line all of the edges with our texture. It looks so good! Look at it, it looks like video game texture. I'm so chuffed. Now that we got the foundational elements of the terrain done, it's time to think about the next step, the props. There's so much more than just terrain. There's trees and houses and fences and castle. There's so much here. So let me take you back to a month ago when I started the journey creating our most prominent prop, the trees. So I did a bit of a peruse online, and sure enough, I found a Zelda tree. But it wasn't as detailed or as aesthetically pleasing as what I see in Echoes of Wisdom, so we're gonna revamp it a bit. Taking it into virtual reality, I created some leafy stamps that I then applied throughout in patterns, painting around the tops of the trees and extending the branches underneath. Now here's a happy accident I had no idea it could happen. Bamboo Studio, the 3D printing software for Bambu Labs printers, actually imports the colors as you have it divided. And because it's a multicolored printer, having those areas that I'd already pre-painted in VR ready just to assign to different filaments was amazing. It has pretty good auto supports, but you can also paint specifically the areas that you want to support, which I did just around the outer rim of the trees and then threw it on the 3D printer. Look at that, with the supports removed, it's perfect. Like, it's this adorable little cartoon tree. That's insane. You can barely see the layer lines and it's multicolor. I've never done multicolor before. I can do multicolor. It's just it's done. No assembly required. I've got a tree. I just need hundreds more. This is the A1. All of our trees and they are both ready to chuck on another print. Look at that, immediately. With each print taking a couple of days because it's multicolored and quite a large bed, I could produce over 100 trees every few days, which is fortunate because there are over 700 trees that I'm trying to replicate. So that's at least 2.5 weeks of non-stop printing trees and trees and trees. So I set Murray and Amy to work on removing all the supports from the trees ready to populate our board.
Hey team, how are we going?
Can I cry yet?
It's time to tackle these massive mountains at the back. Once everything is stacked and glued, it's then a matter of going around with my hot knife and creating that mountainy texture.